So, in case you were unaware, Boeing has been in the headlines recently, and not for the greatest of reasons. In the past week, I've covered updates as they've happened on the 737-9 accident, investigation, and grounding. But as it is the start of the week, let's ease ourselves back into things and focus on where the fault has been put, delivery updates to the MAX, setbacks, and the FAA. Beginning with whose fault this is, it does actually feel rather peculiar to be labelled such a thing as someone's fault. Still though, through observations and comments from industry experts, executives and more, the fault does have to lie somewhere. Multiple parties have been tossed around, such as Boeing, maybe the key suppliers involved in sending the parts, say Spirit, or the Federal Aviation Administration. It has felt increasingly like in the past few days, the blame, or whose fault it is, has leaned more on Boeing, as further details have come to light over quality assurance difficulties and how Boeing described quality escapes. We're only halfway through the first month of the new year, so to refresh everyone's memories, the FAA is currently investigating Boeing, not necessarily over the incident that occurred aboard an Alaska Airlines flight, no, but rather their production practices, as elements such as loose bolts and other quality escapes happen on the production floor, an area that is meant to be pretty secure and not having these things slip through on a regular occurrence, but that seems to be taking place. The FAA says they'll be watching over Boeing to determine what happens on that production floor. Experts, however, have continued to highlight Boeing's cost-cutting measures and focus on financial more than anything. Is the latter part of the focus inherently wrong? No, of course not. Anyone with a business knows that you need to turn a profit to be successful and make decisions accordingly. However, safety cannot escape the focus when producing a plane, because finances are deemed to be more important. Boeing was certainly identified to have done such a thing for an extended period. However, when the MAX crisis hit and the higher-up board largely reshuffled, it was reassured to us that the culture would change and that would be a priority. Up until around a week ago, bar very minor niggles, it had actually appeared Boeing was making good progress on that. However, now it has been identified that maybe wasn't really the case. That's why we're now seeing much blame be placed on the leadership at the plane maker, who have thus failed to address several of the key points that they were essentially brought in to do. Now, the Wall Street Journal is reporting that there'll also be a further delay to deliveries towards China for the 737 MAX, which is another blow to the plane maker. The Wall Street Journal said that China is very much of the belief that they'll hold off on acquiring any of the series until further investigations occur. While the 737 MAX, yes, made a very strong global recovery, there was always a substantial amount of focus placed on China, who remained very hesitant to return the aircraft to service, let alone welcome in new aircraft. While yes, political tensions undoubtedly played a role, this latest development is certainly a reason for them to just extend the delays. Deliveries recommencing officially to China for the MAX were actually slated to occur pretty soon and be another crucial stepping stone to the recovery of Boeing and the series, but now we have more uncertainty involving it. Another important factor to consider is these Chinese customers are not delaying it because it's the 737-9 that remains grounded, as orders for this variant from customers don't exist. No, it's actually more concerning around the products that Boeing are offering and their safety standards. 2024 was, as I've touched on and covered on the analysis channel here on YouTube, Globetrotting, meant to be a quiet year. Quiet doesn't mean there weren't set to be, say, groundbreaking developments to the 777X, maybe some fantastic orders or something in between, but when I say quiet, I mean regarding issues. If Boeing could have moved through 2024 with relatively no news stories and no negative findings in their operations, and we witnessed the continued output of aircraft meeting the highest standards, well, it would have marked another crucial year in their rebuild. Boeing had been putting in a lot of work to restore that reputation from an onlooker's perspective, but now, according to many, it has been completely undone, and a lot of that could have been seen as false. While the timeline for reapproval of the 737-9 remains unclear, there are very valid arguments that this doesn't make much of a difference to the broader image of Boeing. In yesterday's video, you may recall I discussed how the problems run far deeper than just the 737-9. Once this aircraft is reapproved, it'll be a start, yes, and obviously in terms of the operational impact felt on customers, this will lessen too. But it doesn't mean by any stretch of the imagination that Boeing is out of the firing line, as thorough investigations are undertaken by the FAA. Now, these investigations even stretch as far as Alaska Airlines, who have said in recent days and been very vocal that they don't understand how the aircraft produced by Boeing can't be up to standard. And Alaska and the FAA currently will be taking a very close look into just how Boeing produces its aircraft. Why? Well, especially for an airline, trust is no longer present. It's hard to blame a customer for losing trust, but still, if this balloons out further following an investigation, a massive amount of damage will be felt on the manufacturer, more than what has already hit. Some believe 2024 is already done, not in the sense of the calendar year. Obviously, we still have quite some time for that, which seems odd because the past 15 days have felt like a lifetime. But for Boeing, with all of their focus now being placed on something they couldn't really avoid, this will likely be the large headline story for the next 12 months. In fact, Boeing would probably hope that there's not another big story, as that would mean something negative would have also occurred. Equally, and to conclude, there's been a lot of talk on the Federal Aviation Administration, or just more commonly and simply the FAA, and their oversight of Boeing, which they said that actually increased recently. Analysts have expressed on multiple occasions now concerns over the available staff to make this happen, and others argue that the FAA shouldn't have to baby Boeing. The FAA says that there's hundreds of thousands of components that make up an aircraft, and as a result, it can't simply look at every single thing the plane maker installs. That wouldn't be practical. It would take an abundance of time. They need to make sure, really, that the planes Boeing are producing are up to standard on a continued basis, and clearly, once more, things have slipped through. The FAA believes the only way it can work around this is by going on the floor and truly inspecting how ultimately every single plane is produced, more so the practices around that. Are they rushing it? Are there issues? Is there a lack of understanding of what's going on? Are management providing adequate instructions? All these things are very important for the FAA to consider when conducting their own investigation into just how so many quality escapes can occur. So, what are your thoughts, and where do you stand on this ever-evolving situation? You can let me know down below in the comments. Your support is greatly appreciated. I can't thank you enough for tuning in across the past week. I know obviously it's related to the subject and the videos, but at the end of the day, this has been the best week on the channel in nearly 9 years, and that is a channel record. So I say thank you. Make sure you're staying tuned, as there will be more updates tomorrow as Boeing continues their process to returning the aircraft to service and also trying to fix a culture that seems so fractured. Take care, be safe, and I'll see you then.